Yes, it's true. It chomps quietly. Usually we wait till dessert, but we have a lot to say. We're a very exciting program, and so we'd like to get going. So we'll continue to have lunch, but also get started with the program. So our moderator is Kay McClenney, which I'm sure most of you have no need for an introduction, but she is the director of the Center for Community College Student Engagement at the University of Texas in Austin, and certainly, one of the most important leaders in our area in the country. And we're delighted to have her here to moderate this session. Kay.
I believe I'm going to move this over here, and if that creates a problem for people on line of vision, then let us know. But I will sit with my colleagues. This is a real treat, a turnabout spare place sort of treat for me, and I am joined today by, on my immediate left, Scott Jaschik, who is editor of Inside Higher Ed, one of the leading journalists observing our field, and Kevin Carey, who is in a new position as Director of Education Policy Program at the New America Foundation, and I only learned about that last week, so congratulations, Kevin. So Tom and Kathy and I actually talked about what kinds of questions we would like to put to these two colleagues, and then this morning we were laughing about what a waste of time that was, because what's going to happen is that Scott is going to answer the questions he would have asked, and Carey is going to answer the questions I should have asked, and so we'll just see. But the fun of this is that we have these two astute external observers of our work, and the context, you might say, is, okay, so why ask two astute external observers of community college work to talk about developmental education? And my answer is, we ask them that because in very serious ways the future of communities of the country and of huge numbers of individual students and their families rests on the question of whether community colleges will be able to find the ways to produce better results through the developmental education work. And that means either ensuring that more students enter college ready, or that once at the doors of the community college that they are more rapidly and effectively moved to college ready status and on through programs of study to credentials. We are going to begin this discussion with the picture that Tom put on the table this morning, which is that in most places, developmental education as presently practiced is not working. It's certainly not working as well as we and our students need for it to work. So the first question I'm going to turn to both Scott and Kevin with is this. It's sort of, we're here in this, you may have noticed this, in this Ivy League university with a whole bunch of very smart people who are talking about what works in developmental education, what kinds of changes institutions are going to have to make for it to work. But my question is, outside this room, who cares? Who is it, from your perspectives, in positions that matter, who understands and cares about the issues at hand and the stakes involved? Scott, let's start with you.
So I actually think it's interesting you asked who understands and who cares, and I would argue that those have some overlap, but perhaps not enough. So beyond people in community college, in the community college world, care for obvious reasons. You want students to succeed. People in communities want students to succeed. Everyone knows that to the extent remedial education isn't working, it's a hindrance to students doing whatever it is they really wanted to do at a community college, which typically is not to take remedial education. And so you have it not working. But I guess I've been thinking a lot about this question of what are other people thinking about it? And I think government people love to complain about it. Business people love to complain about it. But I find myself wondering if there is actually right now a danger in some of the people complaining being not people who know what's going on. I was moderated a panel earlier this week in which I was talking with a leader of a state business organization, and he sort of gave the usual statement about community colleges, like, did you know hardly anyone graduates? Did you know they have all this remedial stuff going on, and it's all a failure? And now it happens that this person is leading a business organization in a state where all the community colleges just launched a major reform of math remedial education. And so I asked him what he thought of this reform. And he said, oh, it's just a little pilot project. And I said, no, actually it's not. But you know, we weren't going to really duke it out there. But it concerns me that people who sort of have heard enough to know that remedial education is a problem don't at the same time engage enough to find out, is there anything positive going on right now? Which isn't to say that they shouldn't ask about the problem areas, but concern minus knowledge is a dangerous thing. And I think, and I worry that community colleges are so used to nobody paying attention that they're so grateful for attention that they're not pointing that out. And I think perhaps they should do so more.
Okay, we're going to come back and talk about where it is that people in this room might do better at adding knowledge to the discussion. Kevin, your view?
Well, I think there's a growing number of people who are paying attention and who care, and I would echo Scott's well-put distinction between caring and understanding and the dangers of the asymmetry between the two. It has certainly been interesting to watch over the last few years as there has been a sort of a dual philanthropic governmental consensus emerge around the long-term societal goal of increasing the number of people with college degrees. Like anything, there are people who disagree with that goal, but by and large they're on the fringes of the kind of consensus governmental philanthropic business opinion that is that the long-term economic prosperity of the nation requires large new investments in human capital, and that human capital is primarily understood as the acquisition of post-secondary credentials with value in the labor market. Most of the people who matter think that we need to get there, and that the numbers they have in mind are quite large. They do not represent anything that could be characterized as an incremental goal setting. They're talking about an increase in credentialing without precedent, certainly in a context in which it doesn't mostly happen by simply pushing more people into higher education. Now, there are lots of different ways to think about how to get there. Once you've decided that that's our goal, and some of them can be around getting more students in, because I don't think anybody reasonably would say that we have the access problem licked by any means, particularly if you have a little bit more of an expansive definition of what access really means. And there are conversations around new kinds of credentials and so on and so forth. But certainly a big component of the discussion and the strategy is around the pipeline, as people like to call it, and doing something about the large numbers of students who enter in some level into the post-secondary system and don't finish. And as soon as you start thinking about that, you have to talk about developmental education. If you want more people to graduate from college, you have to go to where the graduates aren't.
Yeah.
And that's our community college system and our developmental system. Purely from a raw number standpoint, you get there very, very quickly. And you conclude that if we don't change some of the disturbingly low percentages to much higher percentages, there's no plausible way to get to whatever your goal is for 2025 or 2020, or they're not all exactly the same. I wish they would consolidate around one goal just for the sake of simplicity, but they won't do that. So in that sense, there's been a real interest. Words like acuplacer that people used to scratch their heads at are now entering the public discourse. Statistics around developmental education success rates are kind of cropping up. Sometimes to Scott's point, sometimes in a constructive context, but sometimes in a very critical context, as evidence that maybe we need to blow everything up, or maybe the high schools are irredeemable, or maybe this means that we shouldn't think about. It crosses the line into the argument against higher education sometimes. Well, if that number number of people can't even get through this, maybe we should rethink this whole notion of access to higher education at all. And so that I think is the danger of the new attention, but it's there.
Okay, so to all of you, one of the fun things about this particular discussion is that because the rest of this conference is, let's say, relatively researchy and relatively evidence-based, we've been invited to range a bit more freely into some of the areas of controversy surrounding the subject matter that we're here to talk about. And I don't think that means sort of loose-lipped irresponsibility, but something approaching it. I want to pick up, Kevin, on what you just said. The blow it all up phenomenon is sort of posed here as kill developmental education or not kill developmental education. And everyone knows this is going on. And whether that is out of frustration with the current state of developmental education outcomes or out of a conviction that community colleges in particular simply won't get the job done, simply won't make changes at the magnitude that are needed for the solution, or whether it's just the old saw about we shouldn't have to pay for this twice. We are hearing a lot of rhetoric about kill it, blow it up, smash it, and so on. And so I'd really like to ask you, we see a range of things going on. Position papers, as you say, the Connecticut legislature abolishing essentially by fall of 14 developmental education, and there are many community colleges and state systems that are trying to work on cracking the code. So I want to take you back and ask them if the lens is the public good, the public interest. What's the right answer here? Is it fix developmental education? Is it go back to the 1950s and track students? Is it put those students out on the curb? What is it?
The thing about developmental education is that it contradicts the logic of the education structure we say we have. So allegedly, we have a sort of somewhat age cohort-based system of moving students through a process in a series of institutions, but there are gateways, and that the passage through the gateway is supposed to be achievement or academically based. If that were true, then by definition, there would be no need for developmental education, and so the fact that we not only need it, but that it is pervasive among some populations and in some institutions just rankles people, particularly policymakers, who thought they understood how the system was supposed to work. So the blow-it-up conversation offers a kind of temptation to policymakers to essentially define the problem away. We'll just say it doesn't exist anymore, and we won't have any more problem. Now that's crazy talk, but politicians are susceptible to crazy talk, and so I think there is a danger that there's some kind of administrative solution to the problem of large numbers of students who are of the age to enter higher education, but not academically prepared to do so. That's very different, I think, than the rhetoric that you see from someplace like Complete College America, which is this sort of new nonprofit based in Washington, funded by the Gates Foundation and some of these other foundations that have this completion agenda, that has been very, very aggressive in its rhetoric. I kid Stan Jones, who I've known for quite a while. I said, like, what's the title of your next report going to be? Like, college will kill us all, or something. I mean, every time they kind of come up with something, there's these very sort of violent and kind of active words. But I think that comes from and again, I've known Stan for a long time, and he's actually someone who's got a great deal of experience in higher education, and has really devoted his whole career to the cause of helping more students through higher education that haven't gotten there traditionally. That's what he's all about. And so what I think he's saying is he is speaking against the notion that if we just allow for a variety of circumstances, very, very low numbers are somehow acceptable and should be allowed to continue. What I think he's trying to say is, if failure rates are this high, we simply cannot accept the continuance of that if we pretend to speak on behalf of these students. Irrespective of what good reasons there may be, either because of our high schools or because of funding or because of this, that, and the other, that he is trying to talk against any sense that those numbers can be seen as something other than a crisis that requires immediate and dramatic action of some kind.
So sort of the argument is, with failure rates this bad, how could we do worse than we're doing right now?
Yes.
Okay, Scott.
I actually think, though, that there's some real dangers to that argument. Yes, the failure rates are really bad. But what is striking to me, given the theme of the other sessions of being evidence-based, is what strikes me as missing from the conversation are the 10 studies showing that community colleges that did this found that it works. And there is for all the movement toward focusing on research. I'm seeing lots of research about the flaws in the current system. I accept that. But I am not seeing the research that this is the solution. And that strikes me as, why are we willing, and it just raises the question, why are we willing to do that with this population when with other populations in American society we don't? There are all kinds of government functions that don't work well, that drive us crazy that they don't work well. I am frustrated that there's no air conditioning in the subway in New York City today. That doesn't mean you kill, and that's a fact. It's hot, but that doesn't mean you kill it. But then let's look at this more. You have the question of how to do it right. So if you look at the rhetoric over the Connecticut bill, it said, for instance, that the way they would deal with the fact that you'd only get your remedial help while you're in your credit courses is you get all this just-in-time advising. Now, we know that as budgets have been cut, advising budgets have taken big hits in place after place after place. We know that people aren't following the good advice from Kay and others about how to place students properly, how to figure out what their academic deficiencies are. So what you have here is that you have a solution that I'm not seeing the evidence that's been tested, and I'm also not seeing the evidence that people are making the investments that might make it work. I also see a huge contradiction in that one of the other top issues that people talk about in education is the need for more rigor. We're worried about lack of rigor in college courses. So why do we assume that a course will cover its traditional subject matter and bring people up to speed at the exact same time without an impact there? I just see all of these unanswered questions. So while I think it's very easy to look at the stats and say, yes, it is time for a new system, I don't see the evidence yet. And if some of you researchers have done it, I'd love to get it. I don't see the evidence that it's worked. And so when it's not worked, why are you adopting it on a statewide basis?
Okay, all right. So I'm hearing a direction towards acknowledging the issues, acknowledging the failures, but also towards the importance of fixing it, getting it right, being rigorous about that. But I also heard you say, Scott, that for all that we may not know yet definitively, we're not even doing what we do know, and not making hard decisions about reallocation of resources and so on. So I want to jump from that to another related question about institutional action. And I'm going to pose this one in a false dichotomy of, on the one hand, academic freedom or faculty prerogative, and on the other hand, educational malpractice. This conversation has been on my mind a lot because I've been in a lot of colleges recently, and it came up in one of the breakout sessions this morning where we were having a discussion about new approaches that have good evidence associated with them, and statements were made like, well, this is not for all faculty members, and we have lots of different things going on in mathematics reform and so on. And so you could say, all right, so we could respect differences in academic freedom and teaching style. We could respect the energy and innovation that's going on. But here's my question from the external view. When do we get to the point, one person in this session said it this way, where we'll no longer tolerate bad teaching? That's one way of putting it. But my way of putting it is, when do leaders, courageous leaders, say to their math faculty or their English faculty, please decide what your standards of evidence are for the practice of mathematics education in this college, and then tell us when we cross the line from academic freedom to educational malpractice. When is it that we step up and say, for students, we're going to do math this way?
Well, actually, right now, you can find it in for-profit higher ed. For-profit higher ed is much more willing, I would say, than community colleges to, if there's a new idea about teaching math or whatever, to do a random sample and have some sections do it one way, some sections do it another, see which worked better, and then tell everybody that's how you'll teach it. One of the interesting things I see as a journalist is, if you want to look for good, real random sample testing of educational ideas, the for-profits are good, and actually the military academies are good, because they are willing to tell people what to do and do a test and act on it. And so then people will come back and say, oh, well, so, the faculty all want to do it their own way. And there is some truth to that. On the other hand, I would ask how many community college leaders, having discovered that really we're having more success with approach A than approach B, have really tried to sell it and tried to sell the idea of teaching in a new way. It is messy. It is going to get you some pushback. But if you look at the evidence of various reforms in colleges all over America, the ones that succeed are the ones who involve the faculty early. I can guarantee you that if you come to the conclusion that the best way to teach math is this way, and the first time the faculty are hearing about it is when you've come to that decision, you will get a ton of pushback. I also think there are a lot of examples of reforms where people have been involved early. So I don't think it has to be a faculty rebellion, but it does have to involve a discussion, presentation of evidence, and making the case that it will help students. The other place we're seeing this is in textbooks. Many community colleges are trying to negotiate deals for textbooks for their students, which is a high expense. And the way they do that is only if they have economies of scale. And if they can say, we're going to use one intro psych textbook and one anthology of literature. And so that does involve telling faculty, sorry, you like Norton and you like the Longman, and one of you is going to have to lose out. But I think that there is evidence, if people can be brought along and administrators are willing to stick it out. I think a lot of administrators say, oh, the faculty, they're such a pain. Changing institutions requires being willing to accept that and to come at people and to talk with people and argue with people. And then I think more might be possible. I don't think a lot of people are trying.
Okay, thank you. Now, Kevin, before we turn to you, I want to put some givens out there. Given that this work has to be faculty-driven, given that adjunct faculty need to be engaged and involved, given that that involves a lot of commitment to professional development, given the need for pilots and rigorous evaluation of those pilots, and given that all of that takes time, still, when do we get to the point where we say it's not okay to defy the evidence? Because this is what I hear faculty saying to me. They say, well, we're getting these great results over here, but our colleagues say to us we're going to teach the way we want to teach.
Well, I mean, I certainly think that the easy conflation of academic freedom to pursue scholarship and academic freedom in the conduct of teaching is extremely problematic. But it's also, I understand why it happens, and I think it has a lot to do with the connection between academic freedom to pursue scholarship and a lot of the status built into the profession of higher education. And to sort of say to people whose job is primarily teaching, we're taking your freedom away, feels like justifying a two-tier status system that is already quite powerful, and that you're kind of deprofessionalizing people who are already underpaid and kind of deprofessionalized to begin with. And so I understand why that is as Scott said, probably not the highest percentage way into the conversation. That said, and I think that what Carey alluded to is the right way to go. That is moving toward a different way of talking about status and quality that's grounded in evidence and research. Because certainly, as higher education people, we ought to agree that that is a legitimate way of proceeding. And building, a new sense of status and a new sense of professionalism around achievement and things that work as teaching. So I can't think of any other way to sort of move from there. I do want to make sort of a little bit of a note, or maybe push back a little bit on what Scott said about going to statewide programs. I think everybody clapped for. This is a fundamental problem or dilemma in policy formation, which is when do we try something new and how big do we go and how quickly? Sometimes I think that the system is biased toward incrementalism and biased against change because we have a higher standard of evidence for doing new things than for keeping doing the old things, even though we know an awful lot more about the likely result of continuing to do the old things, and what we know is very sobering. So I mean, the status quo doesn't get a free pass in these conversations about will it really work, particularly if it's really not working.
Okay. Picking up on something that both of you have said, at least implicitly, I want to go back to an issue. Perhaps the toughest challenge for people in this room lies with students who arrive at the doors of community college with the lowest levels of academic preparation. And that group, as everyone knows, is disproportionately populated by students of color, by students from low-income backgrounds, and others that we most need to be concerned about. But still, we have colleges deciding explicitly not to serve them. We have legislatures deciding that they don't belong in college anyway. And so I want to ask you to talk about what's the public price to be paid if we fail to serve those students well or choose not to serve them at all. And how do we think about the communications work that needs to be done with regard to that issue?
I mean, I'll just say, I think that the choice not to serve them is both practically and morally indefensible. I mean, it just...
Say that again.
I said the choice not to serve them is both practically and morally indefensible. So, by practically, I mean, if you buy into the policy or economic notion that we need to invest in human capital, then you've chosen not to serve precisely the people you need to be serving, and morally indefensible because for all kinds of reasons that seem very obvious to me, although I suppose not to everybody, in terms of who has the greatest need, who has been afforded the most opportunity, and quite frankly, who we can bring the farthest for relatively small amounts of money compared to the largesse that we heap upon the kind of people who attend colleges like this one.
Okay, Scott.
I actually think people need to communicate that, being unafraid to point out the inequities like what Kevin ended with about this university, not to pick on Columbia, but in the next few months, there's going to be a ton of attention on my website and elsewhere about the Supreme Court case over affirmative action. And there will be lots of prominent educators talking about how terrible it will be if colleges are unable to consider race. While we're having that very loud public discussion, I would say a lot of colleges, a lot of states are already making that decision. Okay, that to not serve. States that are tolerating turning away everyone from summer school. States that are tolerating turning away people from sections just because there's not enough sections to do their courses. And if you look at the number of minority students who are affected by budget cuts, eliminating slots at community colleges, it is way more than the number of minority students who might be affected by an adverse decision about affirmative action. And where is the attention? And I guess this goes, and I'll push back on what Kevin said about what I said about trying things on a state policy. when people want to innovate and experiment in higher education, they don't try it out. Congress would never pass something saying, we want to just try a new idea untested on Pell Grants, and we're going to try it out with Ivy League students. Now, you could make a case that that's who they should try it out on, because the institutions are most able to make up for any difficulties, but they don't. I think Kevin's right that systems that are failing shouldn't get a pass on radical change, but I also think it's fair to ask, are the same standards being set for radical experimentation at institutions that serve the elites and non-elites? And I'm always a little nervous about a greater willingness to experiment with one group than another.
Just briefly, I share those thoughts exactly. I will say, however, that if your theory is investment in pilot projects and sort of careful study and investment in research, and this is the very kind of safe and popular theory that's out there, you need another theory about how innovation grows to scale. And if you don't have one, then I think you have some work to do.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask these guys one more question and then open for you to ask, and I'll ask that you do go to the microphones that are placed in the room, because otherwise it's pretty hard to hear you. The question I want to ask is this. When I am asked why we don't see better results in developmental education, leaving aside the research and the evidence that is our conversation here, and going to a higher and thus bigger level, I typically offer two explanations. One is that student success and institutional performance has never mattered. That is, in enrollment-driven public funding, you can have an institution that gets great results and one that gets abysmal results, and they're treated exactly the same. And in fact, some would argue that the ones who get really bad results and having students repeat are actually making more money off of that process. The other is, on an institution level, that in many places we still have not decided to do it. Despite the fact that 60, 70, 80% of our students need some kind of preparation to be college ready, many community colleges are still reluctant to make that work their top priority. So, the question back to you is, how do we make success matter?
I'd say you have to align the incentives for the colleges with the right policies. So let me give you an example. I spoke at a community college last year, and they were asking me about sort of hot ideas in remediation, and I said that one of the hot ideas was not letting students enroll too far into the semester because they are almost always going to fail. And I said this not knowing that at this particular college they were debating that issue. And the faculty were convinced, actually by the research, that that was the right thing to do. And they wanted to eliminate late registration. They said that they noticed that when somebody arrived too late, they never caught up, and so let's do it. And so when I said this, I got actually a nice round of applause, and then realized that I was walking into something. And the president then got up, and he said to me, from an educational perspective, you are absolutely right. If I did that, I would have to lay off X number of people. My budget doesn't let me. And he said, and I understand why the faculty applauded, but I have to pay the bills. And if you look at the way systems are structured in state after state, you find examples where doing the right thing educationally hurts you financially. And I don't think you can expect the people who lead colleges and are struggling to balance their budgets to do too many altruistic things if it will take their money away. And the thing is, you said, we know what works, and on so many things where people know what works, the financial incentives are opposite. And so to me, that is, you've got to align those, and then all you have to do is win the philosophical battle. But many a president doesn't
a bit of a self-serving opinion as the head of a policy organization, but nonetheless, a system where the combination of structure and policy is such that the biggest problem confronting some community colleges is too many students wanting to enroll is not a system that is structurally conducive to a completion-focused agenda. Full stop. And if you don't solve that problem, then, and particularly in a decentralized higher education system that currently and will continue for a lot of good reasons and some historical reasons, but to grant substantial autonomy to our institutions. The decisions will be made primarily at the institutional level, and so the thing we should care most about is what are the conditions and imperatives under which those decisions are made. We are moving in that direction. I think it's, it is perhaps more quickly than some people might realize. In Washington, D.C. last year, there was a great deal of time spent on this big debate around for-profit colleges. And it was, if you lived there, it was kind of this classic thing where people would, there's a lot of money involved when people take out ads on the metro stops that are basically targeted to like 5 people. And you put them on the metro stop where they come and go from work. And this was kind of one of those things. And there was when the sort of the process concluded itself and the Obama administration finished in its regulations, there was actually somewhat of a consensus that they had caved, in that they had sort of sold out and watered down these regulations and had let these for-profits off the hook. And what nobody really talked about was that this was a major step forward in the assumptions of how the federal government is going to regulate higher education, that it was no longer content to rely on the combination of market forces and voluntary accreditation to decide who has access to federal money. And the foreseeable future is one in which federal money is a larger and larger percentage of all the money, because it's the only money that's left. The federal government is the only body out there that can print money and either give it out or borrow it. And so, and the other thing nobody knows is that community colleges are subject to the gainful employment regulations. No one knows that. Everyone thinks it is tied exclusively to for-profit colleges. So, I do think that policymakers are becoming more comfortable with the idea of saying, we're going to look at what happens to the students you enroll, make judgments about that, and craft policy accordingly, and frankly, I think that's the way we need to go.
So we're on the way to making it matter. Questions? None at all. Here, I'm sitting here thinking that you guys have told us a lot of things we need to be doing, but nothing about how to get them done. David Longenecker, a question, please.
Yeah, I'll try to just stimulate some discussion. Kevin, you talked about it being a moral bankruptcy to not serve the students at whatever level they need that service. Let me give you another question about which is more morally challenging, which is to not serve those students or to say we'll serve those students but not do so, which is in essence today at the third level of remediation the story. Almost the probabilities that a student at that level or below that level will succeed are pretty remote. Some states 3%. So I know a state that where they were 3% that dropped it and put those students into a adult basic education combined with vocational programs. But had they not done that, if they had just dropped it, which is more morally bankrupt, to not serve those students or to say we will and don't?
Great, difficult question, David, thank you. I guess I'll just make the observation that the kind of students you're talking about, all the way at the third level, however you want to describe them, are so far at a remove from the logic of our higher education system as we have defined it, that it really makes me wonder why we have them in that system at all. I mean, I live in the District of Columbia. We have a public university. Again, not everyone knows that. In the District of Columbia, University District of Columbia. Somehow I'm on their mailing list. They send me their course catalog every year. And so if you look at like the math department, this might be a little different now that they've split into a community college, but if you look at the course offerings of the math department at UDC, what you'll see is like all the way at the very bottom, a couple of sections of what anyone would legitimately call college math. Yet UDC is designed as on some level, and even the community college, as a university. It has faculty who have tenure and are unionized and have various kinds of academic freedom, and I mean, it is structured in a classic way on some basic level. That is the way all higher education institutions, as we understand them, are structured. Those two things just seem in utter conflict to me. I don't think that if your business is offering 25 sections of arithmetic to people who are in their 20s and have jobs and children, that you should be doing that in anything that resembles the University of District of Columbia. So I think we need to be much more expansive in thinking about the methods and institutions that are actually purposefully designed for this problem that's not going away anytime soon, as long as we don't isolate those people from the eventual opportunity to get into the higher education system as we understand it, which is still the only gateway into economic opportunity that we have in this country.
Thank you. Kathy has given us permission to infringe very slightly on your break, and I see Mike Collins has a question.
Shops of the future. I just want to stay on this 3 levels down for a second. If the assessments are flawed, and we have data from the Achieving the Dream data set that shows us that some students that are 3 levels down that are able to avoid mandates to enroll in college credit courses and can actually be successful. I mean, I guess I'm wondering, should we be having the conversation we're having? I mean, I think that we might want to think through the assessment in those people that are that low. We know from Tom Bailey's work and David Connolly's work that kind of that one-shot college ready or not is not really accurate. And should we be thinking for those students really trying to better understand who they are, where they're strong, and where they're weak? I'd love your reactions.
So is it about them, or is it about us being institutions? Your responses?
Well, if you look at the assessment system and you say, all of a sudden we have evidence that we are not placing students in the right levels, it sure should shout out to everybody, okay, why are we using this assessment system? Are there better alternatives, and so forth. At the same time, it's another case where I'd be careful about throwing out everything. I think there is a lot of evidence that letting students place themselves doesn't work, that assuming every student is ready doesn't work. And so it's a huge problem if the systems being used aren't set up properly. But again, I would go to the what is the real, what is the solution?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's we should make a distinction between the placement and the test. We can have discussions about whether the assessment is good and gives us the information that we want in a sort of a reliable and verifiable way. But when we call it a placement test, then the implication of that very clearly is a dichotomous high-stakes decision that is essentially procedural. Are we sending people this way, or are we sending people that way? Which seems to kind of be rooted in the instinct, and again, basically the design of colleges and universities as we understand them, which is that if we need students to learn something, we should create courses designed around that knowledge and have them take those courses, and if they pass, they get to take more courses, and if they don't pass, they don't. I think that, a lot of the evidence around developmental ed and a lot of the approaches to developmental ed seem to work suggest that that's a bad idea. So we absolutely need diagnosis of students, but we ought not to assume that the smart thing to do with that diagnosis is placement as we currently understand it.
Okay, Elaine, Kathy's saying if it's a very quick question and a very quick response, we can hear from you.
I don't have quick questions, so I'll just save it.
Let her try. She said she didn't have a quick question.
All right, well, I was just given permission to take a longer question, so get yourself on up there. Okay, you guys need to be in the spirit of full disclosure. We just eradicated your break because Tom and Kathy would like for you to stay in the room for the next session, and so if you have questions of these two guys, please feel free. Elaine?
I think there's a real distinction I like what you said about the difference between placement and assessment. But at the same time, what is happening is that we are disenfranchising a lot of students because of the data that we have around what we're calling the lowest level. And in this room, there are people who are working with that group, and at the same time, the political pressure around completion and the fiscal situation is making it very easy for states to make the decision of getting rid of the students who make them look bad because of political pressure. And our colleges, and my state is looking at getting rid of the lowest level of English, math, and reading, and putting it on adult ed, which has no state funds. So I guess this is more a comment, but I do have
I was going to ask if you were getting to a question.
Yeah, the question is how you deal with the political pressure on states and on our college presidents to have better outcomes and completion when data is being used in a way that kind of cuts the legs off of the things that are happening because of past experiences.
Okay. Scott, you want to start there?
Well, you need to, one, demonstrate the value of what you're doing. So let's say, several people have said that the so-called third level down would be best served in adult basic ed, but you just summed up the problem. If that's all fine and well, if you have a good adult basic ed system in place, many do not, or even if they do, can't handle the increased workload. So even if you wouldn't, say, designing from a blank sheet, come up with the same system you have, again, I think you have to ask the question, what happens if you don't? On the money side, there is, I think right now, a very big discussion, not just about community college funding, but about, is there any value to government funding, period? And that there is, in American society today, a willingness, and not just by Republicans, but a willingness by many people to assume that the government isn't going to fix it, and that, we need to shrink government as much as possible. That school of thought, which isn't community college specific, strikes me as a huge danger to community colleges because you depend on federal, state, and local funds. And I don't sense much engagement. And that's a huge long-term philosophical battle to just set of issues to discuss. But ignoring it strikes me leaves community colleges at their peril. And you see community colleges now with single-digit shares of their budget coming from the state, where tuition is the largest source of money. You just see this evolution, and I think not confronting in some way, and it's probably 100 little things that need to be done, and then turning them into big things, not confronting the distrust of government doing anything is going to be a roadblock to you getting the support.
You're there. Other questions? In that case, I'm going to ask you to join me in thanking Kevin and Scott for being